Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your home for the biggest stories shaping the US and the world. I'm Cary, Johnston, live from the Firstpost studios. Our top story on the show today. The Trump administration makes a surprise pullback on its immigration agenda. But is it about policy or politics? Also on the show, can diplomacy in Abu Dhabi halt the war in Ukraine? Or will it continue even after another round of talks? American and Iranian officials prepare to meet in Oman in a bid to ease tensions. But can they agree on a mutual agenda? And Nike faces an investigation over its diversity policies as a Trump pick claims the company may have discriminated against white employees. We begin with the latest on the Trump administration's immigration agenda. The White House is dialing back a key part of its hardline immigration crackdown in Minnesota. President Trump himself is saying the country needs a softer touch on the matter. So, is the White House climbing down under current political pressure? Or are the midterm elections just a few months away forcing a course correction? Well, the White House has confirmed that 700 federal immigration enforcement agents will be withdrawn from Minnesota, but around 2,000 will still remain on the ground. The announcement was made by White House Border Chief Tom Homan, who stressed it was a scaling back, not a policy shift.
We have made significant progress under the direction of President Trump, working with state and local officials here in Minnesota, and I expect that to increase in the coming weeks. Given this increase in unprecedented collaboration, and as a result of the need for less law enforcement officers to do this work in a safer environment, I have announced effective immediately we will draw down 700 people effective today. 700 law enforcement personnel.
Well, Minnesota and especially Minneapolis has been at the center of an aggressive immigration push this year. Thousands of armed federal agents were deployed to detain and deport immigrants. But the shooting of 2 U.S. citizens by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents last month sparked widespread protests and a big political backlash. The Trump administration has made one thing clear, though. It's still committed to mass deportations. The White House continues to blame undocumented migrants for crime and fraud.
For those who are not a national security threat or public safety risk, you are not exempt from immigration enforcement actions. If you're in the country illegally, you are not off the table. And let me be clear, President Trump fully intends to achieve mass deportations during this administration, and immigration enforcement actions will continue every day throughout this country. President Trump made a promise, and we have not directed otherwise. I heard rumors we have, untrue.
Where critics say blaming all migrants for the country's problems is misleading, dangerous and unfair. President Trump now appears to be shifting his tone. In an interview with NBC News, he signaled there may need to be a toning down, but he quickly added that the government is not changing its stance.
I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch, but you still have to be tough on immigration.
Minnesota's Democratic Party leaders have called the limited pullback of ICE a step in the right direction. But they say it still isn't enough. They want a faster and larger drawdown and independent investigations into the killings by ICE agents. With midterm elections just 10 months away, immigration is emerging as a major political fault line. Democrats, who struggled on the issue in 2024, are now using the Minnesota crackdown to mobilize their base. Anger over street-level raids and the deaths in Minneapolis is translating into campaign fuel. And that political heat is being felt inside the White House. The pressure is especially building around Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff and the main architect of the hardline immigration strategy. Miller pushed for arrest quotas and mass street enforcement. According to reports, he was last month absent from a key Oval Office meeting on the crisis. So the partial withdrawal in Minnesota may signal political pressure, not a change of heart. And with midterms approaching and public support slipping, the Trump administration appears to be adjusting its tone, even as its core immigration agenda remains intact. The second day of United States-mediated peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in Abu Dhabi have concluded. Both sides have agreed to exchange 314 prisoners, according to US President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Well, this marks the first such exchange in 5 months, but no ceasefire was agreed. Earlier today, Vladimir Putin's envoy said the meetings were positive, referring to the first day of talks. Asked about outcomes, he claimed there'd been real progress and positive movement forward towards a possible peace deal.
Well, as you know, together with the Trump administration, we are actively working on restoring Russia-U.S. relations in the economic field, including within the framework of the Russian-American Group on Economic Cooperation. We have had meetings today, and they were positive.
Russia's envoy had also accused Europe and Britain of trying to obstruct the talks.
You know, the fact that warmongers from Europe and Britain are constantly trying to hinder this process and get into it can serve as some kind of an indicator. The more such attempts occur, the more we see that certainly we have progress and there is positive movement forward.
And on the first day of talks, Ukraine said there'd been signs of progress. Ukraine's chief negotiator, who heads the National Security and Defense Council, described the discussions as substantive and productive. However, no major breakthrough towards ending the near 4-year war has been announced so far. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the talks must deliver real results that people can feel. In his address, he stressed that negotiations should move the country closer to peace without giving Russia an opportunity to prolong the war. Zelensky then turned to the human cost of the conflict, especially over energy security.
Today was a long day with many internal issues. Energy sector matters were discussed, both the restoration situation and the protection of energy facilities. The situation in Kyiv is difficult, and in some aspects more difficult than in other cities. In fact, resources from across the country are being directed to support the capital.
Zelensky also explained how he viewed the relationship between Putin and Trump.
Putin is only afraid of Trump. That's a fact. What Trump should say to Putin is not for me to say. If President Trump knows that Putin is afraid of him, then he cannot accept all the conditions set by the Russian president. It is Putin who is afraid of Trump.
He also claimed that about 55,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since the start of the war, though analysts suggest this number could be substantially higher. The Kremlin, for its part, said the door to a peaceful settlement remains open. Moscow also made clear it will continue military operations until Ukraine accepts its conditions. In fact, in its daily briefing on Wednesday, Russia's defense ministry claimed its forces had advanced deeper into Ukrainian defensive positions. The ministry also said Russian troops struck targets in more than 150 areas. And at the center of the dispute is territory. Russian forces are pushing for control over the Donbas region, demanding that Ukraine withdraw its troops from the territory. It includes heavily fortified areas that are rich in natural resources. Moscow also wants international recognition of sovereignty over land it seized during the war. Currently, Russia occupies around 20% of Ukraine's territory, including Crimea and parts of the Donbas, taken before and after the 2022 invasion. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said diplomacy will take time, but claimed progress has been made in reducing the number of unresolved issues. He added that the most difficult questions still remain, even as the war continues to claim lives on both sides.
If you look at the checklist of open items that existed at this time last year and the checklist of open items that remain now in terms of reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, that list has been substantially diminished. That's the good news. The bad news is that the items that remain are the most difficult ones.
And back in Ukraine, more than 60 foreign diplomats visited a severely damaged thermal power plant in Kyiv on Wednesday, as Ukraine revealed the scale of destruction caused by recent Russian strikes.
Germany is now already the biggest supporter in the energy sector. We are delivering mobile units to give emergency assistance to people who are suffering in their apartments. We have just delivered the first few units, combined heat and power plants. There's more to follow very soon. We'll deliver also mobile boiler houses.
The European Union has also reached an agreement on a major financial support package for Ukraine worth 90 billion euros, or $98 billion, in loans. In a statement, the European Commission said representatives of EU member states held a closed-door meeting in Brussels where they discussed and finalized the framework of the loan plan, previously proposed by the Commission. So here's the hard truth. These high-stakes discussions were meant to chart out a lasting ceasefire agreement. But the only significant outcome that's resulted from it is a prisoner swap. And as far as the fighting on the ground is concerned, that continues. Well, still to come on the program, robbing the rich to pay the poor, how protesters are going to extreme lengths to highlight rising food prices in Canada. But first, the world will be watching Oman this week because on Friday, Iran and the United States are set to resume nuclear talks in Muscat. This comes at a moment when West Asia feels like a powder keg. The discussions were almost cancelled. Reports suggest the meeting was collapsing due to disagreements over the format and indeed the location. Iran wanted the talks shifted from Turkey to Oman, and the US initially resisted, especially if the move meant no participation from Arab states. But late on Wednesday, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed it. He said the talks will take place at 10 a.m. local time in Muscat. According to reports, these talks were revived after several Arab countries urged Washington not to abandon negotiations. There's also a proposed framework on the table, presented by mediators from Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt. It includes a commitment by Iran to significantly limit uranium enrichment, but it also includes restrictions on ballistic missiles and on arming Iran's allies in the region. So, yes, diplomacy is on, but both sides are walking in, well, with very different agendas. The United States making it clear it wants more than just a nuclear conversation.
As far as the topic of those discussions and what the agenda needs to be, look, I think in order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things. And that includes the range of their ballistic missiles. That includes their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region. That includes the nuclear program, and that includes the treatment of their own people.
Rubio's last point on Iranian citizens matters. Iran's brutal crackdown on nationwide protests last month resulted in the death of at least 3,000 people. The West has condemned Tehran's actions, but Iran is refusing to widen the scope of the talks, saying the only agenda should be on nuclear assurances. Iran insists it only wants to discuss how to convince the world that its nuclear program is for civilian energy and not for military purposes. And Iran is also firm about the venue. Oman, it says, is the only acceptable location because that's where previous rounds were held.
As far as the talks are concerned, I think the Iranians had agreed to a certain format. For whatever reason, it's changed in their system or what have you. We'll see if we can get back to the right place. But the United States is prepared to meet with them.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is increasing the pressure on Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He says Khamenei should be worried. Trump has also claimed Iran was eyeing a new nuclear facility after US strikes hit Iranian nuclear sites during Israel's June war with the Islamic Republic. So, trust is at rock bottom. The US admits that diplomacy with Iran is difficult. Vice President J.D. Vance says Khamenei declines to speak directly with Trump, unlike the leaders of China, North Korea, or Russia. And Friday's talks will take place at a time of heightened tensions around the region. On Tuesday, a US Navy fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone that approached an American aircraft carrier, and a massive US naval An air build-up is underway. Trump has openly said the fleet is ready and can be used to force Iran to back down.
And in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. People have been waiting for 22 years to do that, and we were right at the end. They were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time.
So as of now, the meeting is on, but so is the military build-up, which means Muscat may decide whether the next headline is an agreement or an escalation. Now, sportswear giant Nike is being investigated by a US civil rights watchdog. It's over whether the workplace diversity policies may have unfairly treated white employees. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the US federal agency that enforces anti-discrimination laws, revealed in a court filing that it's examining whether the company's hiring, mentoring and layoff practices broke the law. The agency has demanded internal company data from Nike, including a racial and ethnic breakdown of employees who were selected for mentoring and leadership programs, and how layoffs were decided, and whether some programs were limited to specific racial groups. Investigators are checking whether the company disadvantaged white employees or job applicants or used race in workplace decisions, which is illegal under US law. The agency went to court after saying Nike did not fully comply with a broad subpoena requesting these details. However, this case is unusual. Most discrimination probes start with a worker complaint. This one did not. Instead, the EEOC's chair, Andrea Lucas, personally initiated the case in May 2024. She used a rare legal tool called a commissioner's charge. Well, the charge was partly based on Nike's public diversity commitments, including a 2021 goal to reach 35% racial and ethnic minority representation in its corporate workforce by 2025. It's notable that Andrea Lucas was nominated by US President Donald Trump for her position, and many now see her actions as part of Trump's overall MAGA agenda, including this current challenge against Nike.
The EEOC will take all necessary steps, including subpoena enforcement actions, to ensure the opportunity to fully and comprehensively investigate.
Nike says it is cooperating and has already shared large amounts of material. The company described the legal filing as a surprising and unusual escalation.
We have shared thousands of pages of information and detailed written responses to the EEOC's inquiry and are in the process of providing additional information. We are committed to fair and lawful employment practices and follow all applicable laws, including those that prohibit discrimination. We believe our programs and practices are consistent with those obligations and take these matters seriously.
The investigation comes amid a broader effort in the United States to challenge corporate diversity, equity and inclusion policies. Critics argue some programs may amount to reverse discrimination, especially against white workers and men. Supporters say they're meant to correct long-standing workplace inequality. Nike is certainly the most high-profile company to face such a probe, though the Commission previously issued a similar subpoena to financial services firm Northwestern Mutual, which denied wrongdoing. Some complaints were also filed by the conservative group America First Legal, founded by Trump advisor Stephen Miller. Under Title 8 of the U.S. Civil Rights Act, employers cannot make decisions based on race, even when pursuing diversity goals. That means the investigation will focus on a key question. Did Nike's diversity policies promote inclusion or illegally influence employment decisions? Well, for now, the Nike case will only determine whether investigators can get access to company records that they say they haven't as yet received in full. It will be just the first step before any possible lawsuit or penalty in a case that could run and run. And finally, from Canada, a group of activists in Montreal have targeted grocery stores in a dramatic protest against rising food prices. But there was a twist. Dressed as Robin Hood, they entered a supermarket, took food without paying and redistributed it through community fridges and low-income neighborhoods. The action comes just weeks after the same group staged a similar raid dressed as Santa and his elves. The group says food inflation has made it impossible for many working families to get by. With more, here's our report.
Dressed in feathered caps and masks, a group of thieves who identify themselves as activists stormed a Montreal grocery store this week. They walked out with thousands of dollars worth of food and said they did it on purpose. Not for profit, not for chaos, but as a protest. The individuals call themselves Robins de Ruelle, or Robins of the Alleys. On Tuesday night, around 60 people entered a Rochelle Berry health food store in Montreal. Some were dressed like Robin Hood, while others wore masks. And together they took food without paying and left behind a message. Food prices have gone too far. Videos posted online show people calmly moving through store aisles, filling bags with food, medicine, soap, and daily essentials. In the footage, security cameras appear to be spray painted over. Outside, graffiti reading "Profis" is sprayed onto a brick wall. The video is intercut with title cards from the 1938 film The Adventures of Robin Hood. Montreal police say they are investigating both the theft and the vandalism. No one was injured, and until now, no arrests have been made.
Many factors influence food inflation, including disruptions in the global supply chain, volatility in commodity prices, changes in international trade conditions, and retail crime. The prices on store shelves directly reflect the costs of the supply chain.
The incident comes just months after a similar stunt by the same group. In December, days before Christmas, thieves dressed as Santa Claus and his elves raided another Montreal grocery store. Cartloads of food were taken. Some items were reportedly gift-wrapped and left under a Christmas tree. Others were placed in community fridges. Police say that the case is also still under investigation, with no arrests made. The message behind both actions is the same. Members of Robins de Ruelle say many Canadians are working more than ever and still struggling to afford food, rent, and basic needs. In a statement, one member said that when two jobs are not enough to survive, every means becomes legitimate. Food prices have become a major political issue in Canada. According to data cited by CBC, grocery prices rose by nearly 5% year on year, even as inflation slowed in other areas. Between January 2025 and December 2025, food inflation grew more than 10 times as fast as overall inflation. However, retailers strongly reject the group's claims. Metro, whose store was targeted in December, called the theft unacceptable. It also pointed to millions of dollars donated to food banks. For now, the food is gone. The police are still searching. And in a city squeezed by rising prices, the line between protest and crime is once again being fiercely debated. Because the question now is no longer what they stole, but whether this was the last raid or just the beginning.
That's it on the show today, but you can join us again tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from